Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com and dev.to. And what I want to talk about today is becoming a web or a developer of any kind. Okay, bottom line is what I'm talking about here is that you're considering making the career switch to developer. This was me a few years ago. Okay, just a little bit about me that puts things into context is I spent my career between 2008 and 2019 in the financial industry. What I would do is I would train people in finance, okay, to get their different securities licensing, sales training, practice development, all sorts of different types of training. So explaining things, teaching things, that's like water for me. Did have a passing interest in technology, actually a fairly strong interest. I was really interested in like blockchain. When I was young, I wanted to be a video game developer, so I had played with things like RPG Maker, and I did do a semester of computer science coursework before I changed my majors in my life. I got interested in music, and my life kind of went into a bit of a different direction for a while there. So I did have this interest that definitely made the switch easier for me. Okay, but the thing is that you don't have to have that pre-existing exposure to technology, that pre-existing passion for it, to necessarily make that career switch. Okay, but just to put in context, like because a lot of people realize like a lot of things happen for me pretty quickly. But yeah, in 2019, I decided to make that switch, and I started first by like learning on my own. And the big issue I ran into is as you learn more on your own, I the thing is that there's just so much information. It's kind of hard to kind of know what to do with it, how to turn it into, and then much worse, how to turn it into a career. Like, great, I know how to do some things, but is this what I need to know? um, what is expected of me. There's all these different things, and this is why I decided to do a boot camp. And I was very, very pleased with my experience at General Assembly. And apparently, they were pleased with me that they took me on as an instructor. At the same time, I've been working as a developer for companies like Crossfield Digital, Campus Guard. I've also been able to build a little bit of a sort of freelance practice myself, where I have several clients working on also different projects across different languages like JavaScript, Python, and more. So it's been, and then also just my general passion of making these videos, teaching people about coding things. So if you notice, I have like over 1,000 videos on YouTube talking about coding across pretty much every language you can think of. Okay, and the reason I'm telling you this is so that way you guys can get a taste for what my journey was, um, as part of my advice to how to start your journey. Okay, so but bottom line, the first thing is to start learning. Okay, so you right now you're kind of considering the first thing is kind of just like to learn the basics. So what are the basics? Okay, so let's share my screen. First thing you should do, in my opinion, is learn HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Why? People are like, well, maybe I want to be a data scientist. Maybe I want to be a machine learning developer. You want to be whatever developer. Nowadays, a good chunk of development is web development. Like if you take a look at all the software we use nowadays, the majority of it works in the browser in some sort of shape form. Okay, before you used to use a lot of Microsoft Office. Now you can use Microsoft Office in the browser and Google Docs in the browser. Our calendars, our mail, everything we use is in the browser. So software development has become very much web development. And even things that are outside of the browser are oftentimes web enabled. So understanding web technologies are going to be generally core to almost any sector you do. Even if you're doing data science, a lot of times you're doing data science, analyzing data from a web application or pulling data from different sources around the web. Um, Same thing for machine learning. Same thing for almost all other sects of development. So learning web is a good place to start because it's going to come up wherever you go. And a great place to kind of get that initial exposure, to see like, hey, like is this something that seems interesting to me that I have fun with, is with this platform right here, Dash.General Assembly. It has like 5 little mini lessons where you can give you some pretty decent, solid foundation in HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Now, if you go through those 5 lessons and this feels fun and you enjoy playing around with it, then like the next step would be is like I'd hit over to continue just sort of self learning would be free code camp. Okay, they have a lot of cool courses. They have this responsive web design certification and JavaScript algorithms. I would start working on these two, but at this point, like once you guys kind of get to this point, I would really highly start considering joining a boot camp. Okay, because while you can learn here, again, there's a lot of things that you have to ask yourself, like, do you have the right level of discipline, because learning on your own, you have to have the discipline to practice every day, to do a lot of repetition of basic things. Okay, because what a lot of people do when they do on their own is they learn something, they like, okay, I got it, and then they move on to the next thing. So they don't practice those old things enough, that they really kind of build their foundation in a very solid way. Another thing is that people jump too far. Like they'll learn HTML and they jump to like React, or they'll be told like, hey, you have to learn React, so they skip HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and they try to like learn React, and then React seems like impossible because they didn't learn sort of the things you need to learn first. So there's a lot of these things that like one require discipline, require like a good understanding of like what you need to learn, that a bootcamp is really going to help you with. And a bootcamp is going to be a much more affordable option than going to like 4 years of computer science. And then also 4 years of computer science, like what they're teaching you there is going to end up being a lot more theoretical, a lot more base level like programming, which again is useful to know. Like I can definitely tell you the more I've learned about a lot of the more higher level computer science, but it's not necessarily necessary to get your career started. Okay, you can always learn more about that along the way. But the main thing is to get the skills to get your career, and that's what our boot camps will be really focused on. Like, okay, hey, what are the skills? What are the tools that you're going to be using on the job, and how to use them? Okay, and I can only speak to my experience at General Assembly, but my experience at General Assembly as a student was very positive, and I was able to find a role very quickly afterwards, with a development agency. Again, I've worked for companies like Crossfield, Campus Guard. This was shortly after I graduated from GA. But also as an instructor, I've seen a lot of my students go on to really fun jobs at companies like Facebook, IBM, Fidelity, and others. So I can definitely speak to you. You're going to get your money's worth as far as being able to get a course that's going to focus on the tools you need, but you also get access to an outcomes coach or a career coach who's going to help guide you on the job search. Like that was sort of, to me, like the big value add. And a lot of people sit there and like they'll take a look at, like, it costs about $15,000 to go to a boot camp, depending on which boot camp you go to. But again, there's a lot of different factors. They're not all boot camps are necessarily equal, so do your research. But my recommendation would be General Assembly. But I mean, you think about it, usually you're going to have like a team of like 4 or 5 different people working. Sort of, if you're going to like a day class where it's like you're going 8 hours a day, you're having a team of like 4 or 5 people that literally your class is like, that's all they're doing for the next few months. Like you are their students. And that's you get a nice heavy touch, which is nice. And you get a lot of support if you use it. Okay. There are students who don't take advantage of the support that we provide, but I highly recommend going to things like office hours, taking advantage of the extra resources that are provided, and you'll find that like it's a deal. It really is. And then there's different ways to finance it where you can make it as affordable as you want, really. Okay, but that's how it would get started. So again, just to kind of recap, I would start off with Dash. Okay, this is going to give you like a free basic exposure to HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, some explanation. Then head over to Free Code Camp and continue learning from there. Responsive web design. Also at the same time, there's my website, dev.to. Okay, I don't have this quite as organized as sort of like where to start and all these things, but if you head over to the video tutorials, there's like the JavaScript and HTML, CSS. Again, I would just really focus on just getting this core web technology solid, because you'll learn all the different programming concepts that are going to be used in all other aspects of development along the way. But on top of it, you're getting a solid foundation and technology that's going to be used in every other area. And generally, any bootcamp you join, this is going to be the core of it. So having a decent exposure to it ahead of time is just going to make it easier for you to get the most value out of that bootcamp. Okay? So that's what I would do first. But getting a job is not just about learning the skills. And again, these are the core technologies that you're going to use to build things. There's certain tools that no matter what language, what industry you're going to work in, you need to understand. And that's going to include things like Git and GitHub. So you're going to want to learn. So if you go to lab.github.com, GitHub itself provides all sorts of little free lessons that are really actually kind of fun to do, to teach you about using Git for version control and what version control is. Okay, so I highly recommend doing that. And I have like this, I made this little mini before coding bootcamp prep course. This is a little free thing that kind of exposes you to what you need to know before you do bootcamp, or what I recommend to help you prepare for bootcamp. So I highly recommend doing that if you join us over there at GA. But like doing this introduction to GitHub course, like this is going to be great because it's going to teach you all the basic features. Because it doesn't matter if you're using data science, if you're doing machine learning, if you're doing embedded systems. Generally, all your code is going to end up on GitHub. GitHub is the place where we store our code and we share our code. So learning how to use this tool is going to be key to whatever workplace you work at. So knowing GitHub is going to be really valuable. Learning about the Bash shell. Okay, the Bash shell is basically the shell is kind of like how you talk to the computer. It's like this command. Like if I show you this thing, and I type in commands and I say, hey, show me what's inside this folder. Okay, and these are the files that are inside this folder. That's the Bash shell. It belongs to what's called a Unix system. Okay, Unix is an old operating system that is part of the core of Mac computers and part of the core of Linux computers. And the reason why this is particularly important is because most web servers out there in the web are based on Linux. So basically they're using Linux underlying it is a Unix shell, which means using Bash. So even if you're on a Windows computer, I highly recommend installing Windows subsystem for Linux and using that as your development environment. If you're on a Mac's already Unix based, so you can use that. To me, ideal world is just working straight from a Linux machine. I love I'm working from Pop! OS, so that's what this desktop here is. But if you decided that you did want to install like Linux, a couple options you have is like Ubuntu. I generally recommend this because it's pretty easy to use, and also like I don't know how powerful your computer is. So if you have a low or not super powerful computer, Ubuntu isn't like its desktop environment is very lightweight. So in that case, it'll get a little extra juice out of your computer. But if you have a nicer computer, then I would just use Pop! OS. I love Pop! OS. This version of Linux is just really nice looking. It's really crisp. It's just like, very fun to use. Okay, this is kind of the one that I have here. Okay, so there's lots and lots of versions of Linux. I wouldn't even go further than that. Like if you're just new to Linux, either start with Ubuntu if you got a medium to low powered computer. If you got me in the high powered computer, download Pop! OS, and then just basically focus on learning the terminal. Because it doesn't matter what version of Linux you have, the terminal doesn't change. And learning how to use terminal, aka the Bash shell, is really the core to everything. If you understand this, you're really going to understand how your computer works, how it manages files, how it does all sorts of things that are really going to make it really easy to understand why the web works the way it does, all sorts of things like this. So this is like key. This is like you can never spend enough time getting good with this. Okay. But yeah, so essentially you want to learn programming, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and learn about Git and Bash. Okay, now you also need a tool to edit code. What I recommend is VS Code. There are other editors out there, but I like VS Code. Okay, Visual Studio Code. And it's a pretty robust tool for doing coding in any language. Has a lot of tools to help you out. My advice would be to not get too addicted to extensions. Like you can download all these extensions that make your life easier. But in the beginning, be very sparing about what extensions you use. Because what happens, you'll develop a dependency. They'll become a crutch for you, like things that like autofill code for you and whatnot. And you won't learn as much. Your ability won't grow as quickly. You do eventually want to use them because eventually you want to be able to get stuff done faster. Okay, productivity matters. But you want to become more productive once you have a solid ability to do it on your own. Where it's not a matter of, hey, you're having this thing do the work for you. You know how to do the work. You're just giving yourself a speed boost. Because what happens when you go in for an interview or something, you may not necessarily have those extensions and you'll be putting yourself to a disadvantage. So don't get too addicted to using too many extensions too quick. Although they are awesome. Okay, so that's like the tooling. But at the same time is that you want to differentiate yourself from all the other developers out there. So you want to start building your name. You want to start defining yourself. You want to start getting your presence. So you want to be like on LinkedIn right away. Like the first thing you should be doing is going on LinkedIn and adding other developers. So just looking up people who are like, look, I am a software developer. You look up software developer, and I mean, don't add like 100 people at a time, but like, add 2 or 3 people, every day. So like here, software developer, connect, send, okay? And again, the reason you want to add them is because you want to show up in their feed. And then basically what you're going to do is you're going to want to document Okay, you're going to want to document your process, like your journey, by saying, "Hey, today's my first day at Bootcamp. Here's what we did. Here's my first day of this." Da, 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 da. Okay, because that way people see that you are doing this work to become a developer in their feeds. Okay, they're gonna see that you're doing that work, and then by the time you get to that point where you are looking for a job, people are gonna think you've been in this longer than you have been, because they've been seeing your post for so long. But they're gonna know who you are. You're gonna be a familiar face to them, and you're not gonna necessarily be. So people might, and also you might just hear about jobs from other people posting, saying, "Hey, my company needs this. My company needs that." Don't necessarily be a nuisance either. Don't be like, "Hey, everybody, someone hire me," or start inboxing people, "Hire me, hire me." The idea is just to be visible through those posts. Another great way of doing it is dev.to. Dev.to is a blogging community for developers, where you write your blog post in what's called Markdown, which is another technology you really need to learn. It's just an easy way of writing posts. Like usually you would use like Microsoft Word, and you would have to like highlight text to make it bold. Markdown is just like a kind of like, just to kind of show you. I would write my post here, and if I want like a title to be bold, I would just do 2 hashes and say, "Hey, this is the title," and then I'd be like, "Here's some text," and I would just write a bunch of text, and then here's like the next section, so I just do section 2, and then if I want like a smaller subheading, I can do 3, and this is like subheading. And what you do is you write your whole post in this Markdown language, and you post it, and it looks really cool. Like if we take a look at one of my posts, let's see here, like this is a post I just did. So you see here, like you see all this, but really if I look at it, what I wrote was this. Okay, one, it kind of gets you thinking. It's just one. This is the same language you're going to use to write documentation, because not only do you have to write your code, you have to document your code, and that's really important. It's really important not just to be able to code, but to be able to explain your code. Okay, which is why I definitely recommend blogging, why I recommend vlogging, making videos about you coding like I do, why I recommend doing a podcast, because any excuse to talk about code is going to help you become a better communicator about code. Okay, yes, okay, better communicator about code, and that's going to help you do better during your interview, write better documentation, and overall just do better in making that career switch. Okay, and on that note, okay, again, so I kind of just summed that up there. Do make a YouTube channel, code, go over things that you learn. Okay, the best way to learn is to teach. So just like you learn how to make variables, make a video about making variables in the language that you were just learning. Okay, you are, same thing with on YouTube, write a blog about it, etc. And yeah. So again, to kind of sum up, start learning. Okay, start learning the languages. Start learning the tools like Git and Bash. Okay, consider signing up for a bootcamp. Again, I'm recommending General Assembly because I know them very well, and they do the job, and all the instructors are super cool, super passionate people that I love working with. 3, start building your brand, like building up your connections on LinkedIn, posting about your journey, writing blogs, vlogs, and podcasts about what you are learning, so that way there's this big sort of breadcrumb trail about what you've learned. Eventually you want to create a portfolio website. Like mine is not the nicest. Like I'm more of a back-end person, which means like I deal a lot more like logical type code and less with the visual stuff. Okay, let this load for a second. There we go. So now it's all loaded. But see, it's like nothing super fancy. But what matters in a portfolio, okay, a lot of people try to do, if you're trying to do like design work, like you want to do design, a lot of heavy visual front end type work, then yes, this should be like super pretty and animated and super cool. Like there's some really fancy portfolios out there. But the main thing you want, regardless of what type of development you want, is you want to make sure they can get your GitHub, and when they go to your GitHub account, that you can choose different repos, different projects of yours to show up on this main page. Okay, you want to make sure you show ones that are, are sort of like the pieces that you want to like say something about you. So like for me, I have my daily code practice repo that shows like that I do a lot of practice in a lot of different languages. Here are some libraries that I made to show that I've built things. And then this is important, that you actually code. So every time you make a commit and you push that code to GitHub, it tracks like, hey, have you contributed code on which days and how much code? This should look green. It doesn't have to be perfect, solid green, because people have a life. but you should see that there should be some green spots every week. Like, shoot the, that you commit some sort of code at least 4 out of 7 days of the week. Because employers are going to look at this, and if they see this is empty, they're going to be like, okay, well, you're not practicing, you're not developing your skills, okay? And keep in mind that the way it tracks this is not because you pushed it to your GitHub account. It tracks it based on your email. So you have to make sure that your local Git setup has the right email that's on your account, okay? Or else it won't notice and it won't track those commits, okay? You probably don't know what that means yet. As you learn Git, you'll know what I mean, but I'm warning you that now so that way you don't waste and lose out on a lot of commits, okay? But basically you want to, and an easy way to keep this flowing is just do daily code practice. That's why I have this daily code practice repo. Anytime I do practice on my own every day, I just commit the code. So that way it's a commit, and I have proof that I did the work, okay? And then I did some other fancy stuff, but I won't get into that now. Okay, going back to the portfolio. Your resume, like I did, what I did is I made it where like it's a printable, but it's a website, but it's printable. Projects, you want to be able to display some projects so people can see like not only the application in practice, so they can actually see your application live and running. So you want to build things that they can actually use and see your code alive, and the Git repo so they can see the code that you wrote. Okay, and well, this is libraries, the same thing. It's just these are libraries that I've made. That's probably not as typical. Not many people build libraries. Libraries are just like code that other coders use, and your blog. So that way they can see the way you communicate about code. So I write a lot of tutorials. These are probably a lot of tutorials that you'll find very useful. So I recommend reading them. But yeah, so basically bottom line, it's all about learning and building your calling card, building your brand. And you can do it. You can break into this industry, okay? And here's the thing, you'll never feel like you're good enough. It's what's called imposter syndrome. Like I feel it every day. Every day I feel like, hey, do I know it enough? But somehow I get assigned tasks and I get them done, okay, no matter how much I doubt myself on the onset, okay? Every time I get a new task, I'm always like, man, I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to do this. And I would say 99% of the time I'm able to do them. They oftentimes require some effort. They require me to do a lot of research and reading and learning, but they get done. When you develop those skills over time with practice, which is why I generally kind of recommend, because I know prior to doing the bootcamp, I was just kind of like learning things all out of order. I was doing a lot of practice of skills where like my foundational skills weren't built up enough yet to really like. So I was like basically learning a lot of React, but my JavaScript wasn't necessarily like as solid as it is now. So I was really like learning a lot of things very arbitrarily. Like I was doing things in React because I was told that this is how you do it in React, but I didn't understand why I was doing it. So I didn't understand how to customize it further. So then going to the bootcamp and really kind of learning JavaScript much more in depth and getting an opportunity to practice those fundamental pieces of just like writing arrays and manipulating arrays, creating objects, manipulating objects, really then helped me once I got back to React to really understand what I was doing a lot better. So hopefully this advice helps you understand like, okay, this is what you need to do a lot better. But my name is Alex Merced. You're free to add me on LinkedIn and ask me any questions you want. Maybe I'll see you in my class one of these days. Also, there's plenty of videos you can watch in the meantime. I have videos on everything because I like to talk and I like to learn. And that's the thing, you want passion, okay? You don't need to have passion going in, but you need to find a passion for coding. Okay, if you go into that interview and they don't feel like this is something you care about, it's going to be a lot harder because there's going to be other people who are passionate about this. It doesn't necessarily mean, hey, you're going to be passionate about coding in itself, but find something, somewhere. There's some library, something you can do that's just really exciting for you. And trust me, there's plenty to learn. There's plenty of places for you to find your niche. And also take advantage if you're switching from another career that you bring some expertise that's going to allow you to find that gives you an edge. So if you're like, you were in medicine, being able to work in software for, the medical field, you're going to have a leg up because you understand the medical field and you understand development. If you were previously a financier, you're going to have a leg up when it comes to fintech, etc. So take what you know now and realize that the life you've had before you make the switch gives you an advantage if you take advantage of it. All you have to do is build the brand and build the skills, and you will have a lucrative career with plenty of potential, because there's new. And the thing is that you'll always need to be learning, because new technology is constantly coming out. Old technology is constantly in demand, because old companies still need people to do the old things, and new companies need new people to do the new things. So the need for developers, especially now, especially after 2020, now every business really needs a strong web presence. There and literally almost anything you can imagine that we do in our daily life needs to to develop more automated ways of doing it, more web-based ways of doing it. So there's just this endless, infinite need right now for developers. So why not? Okay, and it is totally doable. I've seen people of all ages, all walks, get it done. All you have to do is believe in yourself. I believe in you, so do it. Okay, and I will see you on the other side. Stay in touch. Have a great day and enjoy.